Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's my pleasure to bring this report to you this evening to discuss this item confronting our community. As you know, Proposition 64, which was approved last November, had a number of implications for our community. Just a little bit of history is provided to you about when the state started on October 9, 2015. The governor approved the bills that provided for medical cannabis regulation in the state. And then on November 8th of 2016, California voters approved Proposition 64, which will control, regulate, and tax adult use of Marijuana Act, which allows individuals to possess, use, and cultivate recreational marijuana in certain amounts. So that action was passed on November 8th of 2016, last fall. Following that, on December 14th, 2016, and on January 11th, 2017, the City Council adopted and extended our interim urgency ordinance, establishing a moratorium pertaining to private marijuana cultivation and non-medical facilities pursuant to Government Code Section 65858. And the interim urgency ordinance is effective until December 12th, 2017, this year, latter part of this year. And that can be extended for additional 1 year. And that will become a point of discussion later on the presentation. Another important date is January 2018. That is when the state will be is scheduled to start issuing permits for this activity statewide. And their process is still being defined at this time, so we don't know what character that's going to take. So Prop 64 and the previous actions taken by the state have presented a number of impacts to the city, a number of choices for us as a community to consider. And just a few, there's many things. When the last time we met on March 29th, you had directed staff to come back with some concepts, some ideas, and present to you some information that would help craft a strategy for the community. So I'm going through that process. These are some of the things that some of the concepts and issues and challenges that we were faced with. You know, do we do something now with this item? The clock is ticking, or do we do something later with the impacts of Proposition 64? And then what are the community needs? And we had the vote, 52% statewide. That's telling. We had the community vote by precinct. So, but there's a lot of variables to that vote. Do we need to drill down further to see what does the community want? Do they want it? Do they want dispensaries? Do they want cultivation? Do they want manufacturing? And how many? A number of choices pop up. And then there's the public safety issues associated with this. Police, fire, code enforcement, those type of items that surface. As you know, we have issues right now on Clinton Keith. And we have laws on the books and ordinances on the books, and they're not being adhered to. And that is public safety, and it's costing us funds that we're not going to to recover, and it's taken away from services that should be provided to the community as a whole. Environmental issues, water, and we talk about water usage and drought conditions and microbreweries and all that types of consumption. CEQA comes into play on this. And you know our history with CEQA. We average about 2 lawsuits a year on CEQA. Fiscal rewards, yeah, there's an opportunity for some fiscal rewards on this, but to what extent? We don't know. We need the experts to take a look. We heard testimony from proprietors who offer their amounts of sales and potential for communities, but what's it going to be here in this area? What is the market like? So we would need, a specialized study in that. And who is this going to benefit? Is it the residents of the community, or is it a particular industry of outsiders? That's something that we need to take a look at. The fiscal risk. One of the things in our community, all the challenges that we've had with finances in this city from a starving corporation. And we've stayed afloat despite what the state has done and the recession effects. And we want to jeopardize our fiscal stability for this particular industry. Is now the right time to do that? That should be a concern to the community. We've stayed afloat, as I mentioned. We built our reserves. 2 years ago, we added $1,674 to the reserves, and we just don't. The margins are very thin in this community for us to step out and be innovative and creative. And as I mentioned, or as it's mentioned, Lewis and Clark. Do we need to forge these new paths? Now, we're a community of trails. We like that, but is this a trail that we need to blaze, or can we wait a couple of years and take the I-15 freeway down a nice smooth path, utilizing the best practices that have been developed over the past couple of years? So that's a couple of the options to consider. State permits, they're still in the process of developing their permitting process. The federal regulations, we know what's on the books, and what Mr. Jeff Sessions decides to do is yet to be known. We've heard comments from other legislators about his directions, but we don't know how it's going to affect us specifically. If we wait a period of time, we'll have a better sense of what the feds are going to do. And I talk about the tip of the spear. Do we really need to be the leading edge of this thing? We're a conservative community that has done very well fiscally with the conservative directions that we have taken and the stability that we've built over the last couple of years. Is this a chance that we should invest in at this point in time? So these are some of the thoughts that staff went through in looking at this item, and it pretty much comes down to two options that we'll be recommending to you tonight. Two items for you to consider to make a choice to give to staff. When we looked at this item, we said, geez, these all come with a price tag. And for us to pull $200,000 to $300,000 out of our general fund reserve of $900,000, that's a tough recommendation for us to make to you, knowing what the risk is on some of these items. That risk diminishes over time. If we wait a couple of years, that risk significantly is reduced. So this is the thought process that staff went through. We bring this to you, the policymakers, for your review, and ultimately to give staff direction which path you'd like us to go down. So the first opportunity is we're looking at is if we implemented Prop 64 right now, immediately, what would we have to do to have that be a functional program in our community? First thing we recommend is that we conduct a community survey to determine how much support there is for dispensaries or manufacturing or cultivation or the testing labs, etc. We don't know if we did a survey with the consultants. They're pretty factual. They're a high degree of confidence in their data. So we could pretty much zero in on what would be acceptable to the community here. And then we'd also work with a tax consultant to figure out what is the most acceptable type of a tax, what level, because the state's already taxing this item, and what type of revenue could we expect to achieve in going forward with this process. We've heard testimony from proprietors in this industry, but what do the experts reveal for this community in this area? What would they say our potential would be to generate revenue from this operation? So those two items, conducting those surveys, working with those consultants, that would greatly help zero in on a successful program for the community. Following that, we would decide which type, it'd have to go to a vote of the community if we're going to recommend a tax to pay for this activity. If we did a special tax, that would require roughly 67% of those voting to approve it. And we could do that special tax vote at any time, but we would prefer to do it in November of 2017, as soon as, to take advantage of any possible state election opportunities at that time. If we went with a general tax, like almost like a sales tax, that would require a success rate or voting approval rate of 50% plus one. And that can only be done when there's an election that is involving candidates for office. So we could not do that in an off year. That'd have to be either November 2018, November 2020, unless so that would be the recommended date for this scenario would be November 2018 to take advantage of the advantage of the statewide ballots. Plus, that's the only we'll have three council members up for a re-election or election at that time period too. Those are the two options for a state, for a general tax and for a special tax. If we went with the special tax, that would have to be ideally be voted on in November of 2017. All that material would have to be to the county register by August 11th. Not much time from now. It has to be in their hands 88 days before the actual election, which I believe is November 8th of 2017. So that's not much, pretty short fuse for us to get this stuff going. That's why we're looking to you now for specific direction if we want to go down that path. If we went forward with that, either one of those scenarios, and if we had a successful, if the ballot measure was successful, the next steps would be to develop an ordinance that would provide for the marijuana business or cultivation or manufacture, whatever was included on that in that ballot measure. We'd also be conducting special meetings after that with the council to determine regulations, where in the city it's going to occur, and different types of land uses, and any other regulating details that you'd like to see would take place in those special meetings, with input, of course, from the community. We'd meet with the planning commission. It would have to be approved by planning commission with our recommendation, and then ultimately come to you, city council, public hearings for you to adopt the ordinance providing for this program. City attorney would be involved, with the reviews and the research on this. Staff would be impacted. We'd also be looking at changes to accommodate this, inspections and patrol activities and auditing that would be needed for this program. And then CEQA consultant and study, because CEQA does play into this because of the land use component. So we would need to contract with a CEQA consultant and have them provide us with the best program that would reduce our exposure to any CEQA litigation. Ultimately, all this goes through, we're all set and ready to go. We'd be issuing permits for this opportunity for these businesses in 2019 or 2020, depending upon what the election date was. It's roughly about 1.5 to 2 years after the election, we'd be going live with this program in the city. Okay, so those are some of the steps that we need to go through. That's why we bring this to you now, so we can get some direction on getting the ball rolling here. The costs to do this, if we were to implement this thing immediately, to get this thing rolling, survey consultant, well, to get to the election, whether it be 2017 or 2018, it's going to cost about $140,000 to $155,000. So I'd be asking you in a month or so, I need $140,000 to get this thing going so we can get on the ballot by November. And that's to hire the consultant. who will do the survey. That's the special tax and revenue consultant. It's going to tell us how much we can make off of this opportunity to have it pay for itself. That's going to take into consideration the staff costs, the city attorney, and special legal services that will be needed. The legal service to write the ballot language. That's Measure Z. What experience that was in going through the different rewrites of all the ballot language and the arguments for and against, and that. Then the actual election. If we hold a special election in November, citywide, it's going to be about $30,000. If we do the general election, that would be in 2018, the impact there is about $15,000. Because there's already a district-wide, there's already a 3-district election ongoing. So we would just be adding the equivalent cost of 2 more districts to vote on this thing. Okay. So that's kind of where your cost differential comes in. So it's about $150,000 to get to the election. And then after the election, when it's successful, because we wouldn't want to be bringing this to vote if it wasn't going to be successful. There's a lot of money to invest in this item. After the election is successful, then to implement, write the ordinance and meet with planning commission and all that, and get this thing to the point of ready of issuing permits. That'll cost us about another $100,000 to get up to that point. And then from there, it would just be the recurring costs. We'd be looking at additional staff, code enforcement, police, fire impacts that we'd want to have on board to deal with the activities associated with this program. So that's the number of costs. They're not precise, they're estimates, but it gives you a magnitude of what we're looking at. So I mentioned we got $900 and some odd thousand in reserve, and I'm asking you now for roughly $250,000 to get me through an election. That's a big chunk of the general fund reserve. So that's why we bring this to you now, seeking your guidance. That's decisions staff and I are not comfortable making. The revenues from this, could we recapture those startup costs? Now there's been a number of cities that have gone through this, and they have incorporated what's called a regulatory fee to recapture these startup costs. City of Long Beach did that back when they implemented their medical marijuana program for the dispensaries. They offered, they spent about close to $1 million to set up their program to give permits to nine medical dispensaries. And they ended up, after they set the program up, they ended up charging a regulatory fee about $83,000 for those, each one of those permits. Costa Mesa recently just set up a fee for about $50,000 to recapture those one-time costs for setting up the program. So there is that opportunity. There's also a risk whether this is appropriate or supportable or defendable to charge these types of fees. And
Do you want me to give a comment?
you go ahead.
Just a quick. In fact, could you just go back to the previous slide? And it's a good visual image. So we have Proposition 26, which deals with regulatory fees, which essentially says a city can charge a regulatory fee for the ongoing administration of a regulatory program. What is clear is under those costs, number 3, the reoccurring costs, a city can recover under a regulatory fee under Prop 26. What's not so clear under the law are costs under 1 and 2, the ramp-up costs, if you will, the startup costs. Some cities, I think, have included those, but that's not completely clear under Prop 26, whether you can include 1 and 2, the startup costs. 3 you can definitely include.
Thanks, Tom. So the startup costs, yes, and then the recurring revenue stream for the sales, like a sales tax or a special tax on the recreational use of the product. Yeah, there's opportunity there if that's set up as part of the ballot measure. We have that opportunity to recover monies on a recurring basis based upon sales. State has set up an excise tax 15%. We have to be cautious how high to go. That's the reason what the sales tax consultant did here, is to help us find out what that sweet spot is, where you don't want to damage the industry and, like Tea Party, too much tax on the product, and they'll just, go underground with that. So,
Gary, does that mean we could decide how much the tax is? It's not just what the sales tax already is here?
that's correct. And the ballot language, we would specifically set up a tax unique to this product, in addition to the 1% sales tax. But there could be an opportunity to set up a special tax within the city for this type of, for all sales of this type of product for recreational use here in Wildomar. So we could do that. And just ballpark numbers, if there was $25 million in sales from the community, 1% of that, okay, the typical 1% sales tax that we're used to, we would get $250,000 of that would come back to the city. That's just our typical sales tax, the 1%. That would pay for about an officer and a code enforcement person, full-time. Okay. So there is that opportunity to get that recurring revenue stream to pay for these associated costs with this program. So that's kind of, well, that's the major highlights of if we try to implement this program as soon as possible, knowing that we have some time constraints with the state and the community. So that's the steps that we need to go through and some of the estimated costs. The other option is if we go ahead and we just defer this item. And by defer, what we're talking about there is we will adopt an ordinance that extends what we currently have on the books with this moratorium, but it extends it to a date certain or a period certain in the future, say 2, 3, 4 years in the future. And what does that do for us? Well, specifically the directions we would receive from the council would be, to update our existing ordinance and provide that criteria in there about reviewing it in the future. They would, and why would we want to defer it? Number of reasons. Primarily, it reduces the fiscal risk to the city's general fund reserves. As I mentioned, the price tag to go with the ASAP program, that's $200,000 to $250,000 known, taken off of the reserves spent this year. It's quite a challenge for our community and our fiscal stability here. If we defer the state and federal policies and processes, we'll know better, we'll know more, we'll know specifically what the state is going to be doing with the process, what the permitting program looks like, and what the feds are doing. Are they implementing their programs or not? Are they looking the other way? We will have a much better assessment of that at that time. And one of the key features of waiting is for us not to be the tip of the spear of this program. Let somebody else go through and refine the processes. A couple of years from now, then we can go and select the best practices from these other cities, apply those practices here, and have just a top-rate program at minimal expense and highly efficient program for our community. So we wouldn't have to spend a lot of resources. We don't spend a lot of, it's not so much the financial resources as it is the loss of productivity here at the city, because you're taking away staff resources from doing programs that are promoting the community and in total, and you're bringing those resources to one specific task that's going to benefit a smaller segment of the community. Downstream, we're going to know the most efficient way to employ this program and to develop these processes, because they'll already have seen what those best practices are. So that definitely would help staff, helps the community, and reduces and keeps our service levels to an optimum for the next couple of years. The CEQA issues, and you know, we're like a magnet for CEQA here at the CEQA litigation here at the city. By then we will know hopefully we'll know some of the CEQA issues that would have been identified and ideally court tested by that time, but that may be a bit premature because it does take time to go through the systems. Another component of this would be that the product sources, you know, you talk about, geez, if we put that out for a couple of years, oh my gosh, the community, they're going to be doing without. Well, there will be other sources for the product in the nearby region. There's other cities, communities, county that will be able to meet the need of our residents who need this product. And overall, the cost to defer this thing is under $20,000. Because why is it so much less for the communities, for the city? Because what we're doing is extending our existing moratorium that we have on the product to a date certain in the future. At that time, we can review it, and at that time, if the council's desire to review it and employ or some of those programs in the community, well, then we have the models already established by other communities. Much easier, much simpler for the city to implement, and less costly and more efficient for the community. So, in conclusion, basically have two firm options. Door number one, we open that and we can get this thing going immediately and start this project tomorrow, get this thing going. Or door number two, we defer this program until we know a lot more, we're wiser, a lot more educated on this subject, and there's practices already been employed, and we can take the best of those programs and utilize them here at the city, if that's the desire of the community. So, those are the two items that staff is looking forward to from direction from the council. As I mentioned, this is a costly adventure, and we want to make sure that we understand the direction of the community specifically before we take any steps. That completes my presentation, and staff is available here to address your